Is it?
Chancellor, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. Hello, everyone. This is Nicholas P. Ugero, and today I have the pleasure and honor of having Shammah Chancellor on my channel today. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a little early here on a Sunday, but other than that, it's good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and showing interest. And I know you're an early bird, so this actually wasn't too bad for you, but
Yeah.
I do appreciate the time. So for anyone that's not familiar with your work and what you're all about and your mindset, if you just want to give an introduction of yourself and just your thoughts on government and the financial system as it is standing right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a computer programmer for a long time. Started working on that when I was really young. Went to university for computational physics. Kind of come from a poor background, so I had to get essentially a grant from the government, and that the repayment for that was to go teach physics for the Navy. And then after I got out of the Navy, I came to San Francisco and worked as a distributed systems engineer for a while. In 2017, one of my friends, Maurice Sachet, he started essentially started Bitcoin Cash, and I quit my job to help him there. And I've been working on crypto stuff ever since. After I stopped working on Bitcoin Cash, I started working on Stamp that you had mentioned. And then most recently, I've co-founded Lotus with some other individuals and started porting Stamp over to that. And we're still working on those projects.
Awesome. So if you want to just go delve into your association with Bitcoin Cash and what was the motivating factor for Bitcoin Cash to even be created? Why was it that Bitcoin was on a certain blockchain and then you guys happened to split?
Yeah, so little background. I'd heard about Bitcoin like really early on, probably the first time it was slash dotted, but based on how it was set up, I didn't really think it could scale. And that's pretty important for something to be adopted as worldwide digital currency. I had a friend, my friend Omri, he's also a software engineer, and he's been working on some other open source projects with me. And then in, I think, 2000, I hadn't really followed Bitcoin, didn't have any. In 2017, early on, he came and visited me and started explaining what he was doing, what his project was. And from that, I got out of him how you could scale Bitcoin. So then I started actually getting interested in cryptocurrencies because I realized you could actually service everybody that needed to use money. Now, why Bitcoin Cash existed was essentially because of an incentive problem. A lot of people think that there was like some, CIA, spy op, whatever, corruption. That's not really what's required in order to mess a project up. It's all about incentives. So Bitcoin, when it was made, great technology, first of its kind, Satoshi kind of spitballed on how the issuance and funding works. So in Bitcoin, you mine the coins, all of the funds go to the miners, but software engineers don't end up getting paid for their work. So there's a lot of essentially, you might call them, true believer software engineering monks that were donating their time to Bitcoin, which doesn't work. It's a big project. It started to get out of hand. So they formed a company called Blockstream and took outside investor funding from PayPal and a number of other large corporations. Investors want a return on investment. And that company still doesn't get any Bitcoins from the blockchain itself. So they came up with a project called Liquid, which is another network that it's essentially a side chain for Bitcoin that is scalable. And the revenue from that chain goes to Blockstream and can be distributed to their investors. Now, whether it ends up being profitable or not, it probably won't because things that were unforeseen happened. But they had an incentive to keep the block size small in order to drive demand for their product. So kind of the core developers on Bitcoin have this incentive to keep it small. And now, while Bitcoin is a decentralized network that anybody can kind of leave and join, software development's always centralized. Like somebody has to commit to the repo, somebody has to compile it, somebody has to distribute the binaries. So software development is always centralized. So that led to Bitcoin Cash and the fork there. So a number of very early Bitcoiners, people are messaging me. A number of early Bitcoiners kind of got together and funded this other project. And the basic premise of that was just leave Bitcoin intact, restore some of the old functionality in terms of scripting, and expand the block space so that it could, service everyone. So it was a very minimal fork. It just fixed a number of the protocol issues with Bitcoin that prevented it from doing more than 7 transactions a second. So a good project, but it kept all the same incentives that Bitcoin had.
Okay. All right. So Enzo actually commented, can you explain in a nutshell what is cryptocurrency? Just for the more of the non-technical crowd, just if you can just kind of break that down in a nutshell.
So that is a interesting question. For me, I would say that cryptocurrency is specifically an internet-based currency where the access to sending and receiving coins is based on public and private key cryptography. That's very minimal definition because there's lots of different blockchains now and a lot of different cryptocurrencies, and they all work in slightly different ways. The first one, obviously, it's mining, mineable coin, Bitcoin, and the tokens are issued through mining. So you burn some real world electricity, it creates this digital finite resource. And that's the real problem that Bitcoin solved, is being able to create essentially a scarce digital resource that people can trade.
Okay, so okay, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. That definitely makes it a little bit easier to digest on that, because a lot of people, this is the first interview I've ever done on crypto, so I'm sure some of my audience might be familiar with it, maybe to some depth and maybe no depth at all. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So for Lotus, so you were working with Bitcoin Cash, and then what was your decision what motivated you to go off and create Lotus and do everything that you've been doing with that?
So I like I said, Bitcoin Cash suffers from the same incentives as Bitcoin, which means that there's no funding for these public goods. Open source software is one of the few things that is essentially an ideal public good, right? You produce it, there's no way to restrict it, anybody can copy it. And so there's no incentive to pay people to work on it for any one particular individual. Now, it benefits society as a whole, but why, as an individual, would I go and pay for this to be developed when it's an individual expense to me? So in 2019, there was it was 2019, maybe it was 2020. Getting old and my sense of years is off. But the developers for Bitcoin Cash essentially ran out of money. Like initially, they had received a lot of donations. There was a lot of excitement about the chain. They ran out of money. And so they tried to implement a funding model where some of the block reward goes back to the developers. For them, it was 8%. I think that's the right decision. That some amount, you don't know what the percentage should be, but some amount of the coins that are created should go to the people that are working on creating the software that enables the network to work in the first place. And there's a lot of ideological reasons why people are opposed to that. I understand. But myself, I'm not a hardliner on any particular ideology. I want to do what works. I'm philosophically a pragmatist. So that fork happened. But there's still this problem of, so the developers that were originally working on Bitcoin Cash are working on a cryptocurrency called eCash now, and they're receiving funding from the block reward, and that's sustaining them. There's still a few other problems, though, that I would like to solve with crypto. I think eCash is a great project, but software isn't the only public good, one. And two, once you've created this monetary system and you have access to this public funding mechanism, it's totally revolutionary. Both cryptocurrency is revolutionary, the way the cryptocurrency works, but the ability to program monetary systems is revolutionary. And a way to convert money from into a club good, which is essentially what they did. So in order to use the software, the developers of the software get paid. And so the currency goes from a public good to a club good. You know, you think about like a public tennis court, anybody can come and go. There's no incentive for any particular person to pay to maintain it, but you put a wall around it and then you charge an entrance fee or a membership fee, then the tennis court's a club good and it stays well maintained. So that's what happened with eCash. So eCash is kind of a club good in a sense. But there are lots of things in the world that you can't convert to club goods. But now you can convert money itself into a club good. And that means that you can take care of all these other resources. So I think that cryptocurrency should fund both open source software development, but it should fund a lot of other things eventually. And it provides a totally different way of doing it from the existing monetary systems and the existing way that governments function, where it's based on taxes and forcefully taking things from people, right? Whereas club goods are all voluntary. You can choose to participate or not. So that's fine by me. I don't mind if there is some fee for using it, as long as it's optional. And so that's sort of where Lotus comes in. And the final piece is that the existing blockchains, that their monetary policies don't lend themselves to maintaining a stable value over time. So in order to be at money, these are talked about a lot in the cryptocurrency space, there's essentially, you have to be a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and a store of value. And those three things are talked about as the three properties of money, and they're really sort of interchangeable aspects of that one thing. The problem is, in order to be a unit of account, people get that portion wrong. They think that, like, oh, I have a bank account somewhere, and the unit that bank account is denominated in is that some arbitrary unit of value. And that would seem to be the case from the word unit of account. However, really what that means is that I would be able to take a contract out with you that has some time delay on it. So imagine I want to pay you today for a shipment of coffee in a year, or vice versa, right? There's some period of time between the contract's written and then delivery and exchange happens. So unit of account actually, in order for that to function, in order for you to have those kinds of business contracts, the value of the unit has to be relatively stable over a period of time. Otherwise, I can't risk making a contract with you in that unit. And this is what we see right now in the cryptocurrency space. What has happened with Bitcoin over the years is, because the price is so volatile, people denominate contracts in USD still, but then they settle them in Bitcoin. Right? So Bitcoin is essentially a settlement layer. And this is true for almost all cryptocurrencies. I don't know of any of them that people would risk denominating a contract in any cryptocurrency, because they're just too volatile. So then you get stable coins, and stable coins are pegged to government fiat currency, which has sort of more reasonable monetary policies to keep the value relatively stable over time. Yes, the value of the US dollar goes down over time, but it goes down relatively slowly. You're not taking huge risks out by denominating a contract in terms of USD. And so for Lotus, I want to aim for the token to be stable, and we found a way to hopefully do that as well. Because while stablecoins are great and they're permissionless, they're still tied to government monetary policy. So if the governments implode, if USD implodes, so does USDC, USDT, all these other stablecoins, DAI implodes, like all of the things that are pegged to it fall over. And so how do you make a trustless, decentralized, stable currency? That's another problem that we're trying to solve with Lotus. So those kind of 3 points are what Lotus is about.
Excellent. Thank you for that description. I really appreciate it. That's great. So I wanted to touch on your main tenets in order to make Lotus as stable as possible. And before I do that, Lindsay Cheyenne, she has a question. What is a club good?
Yeah, so a club good is a good that is excludable but non-rivalrous, meaning that you can prevent people from getting access to it, but there's no reason that you would really be fighting with people over access to it, right? So like a basketball court, right? I want a basketball court. It exists. I only want to use it an hour a week. You want to use it a different hour. We're not in a rivalry for access to that court, but it is excludable. And so what we can do is we can agree to put a building around the basketball court, and then anybody that is a club member can access the basketball court. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tobias also asked earlier, sorry for slightly missing this, Tobias, but he said, can Lotus fund the roads?
Lotus can fund the roads eventually. It's very small still, but it could fund roads. And that would be a great thing, I think.
Yeah, very much so. And when you're also talking about the club, it's basically, yeah, just the incentives of it. It's the what some people ask themselves, why would I invest in this if I'm not gonna gain a X this or X amount of what or and so forth. But it helps the community out, and it also helps themselves out, gives other people more access to things. And I kind of use the adage, what goes around comes around. So in a sense, I feel like, yeah, the incentives at this point with the certain mindset that most people have in this world where it's mostly just financial. Most people think in that way. Most of people's values are structured in that. How much do you have? What car do you drive? How much is in your account and all these things. So at this moment, using like what you're doing with Lotus, and I read the white paper and I find it to be very intriguing, talking about nonviolence, talking about voluntary exchange, which is what I'm all about. I've definitely espoused that kind of philosophy of do no harm, take no shit, and no one has any more rights than you, and just don't steal in whatever form it may be, whether it's murder or lying or in some way you're stealing. So it's, and then coercion with taxation and the claiming of someone's labor in any percent, in my view, is slavery. You can't claim ownership over my labor in even 1% unless I voluntarily agree to that kind of exchange. And it's just ridiculous that people really think that that's what we need to do in order to create what freedom. So we need slavery to create freedom, and it's just not how it works. So this whole mindset that you have in the white paper, I'm going to definitely have this in the description so people can actually read the document themselves. Very short, but it's very interesting, and I got to reread it again because I'm still kind of a novice in crypto for sure. I'm lucky to have my brothers. But to focus on the stability aspect, what are some of your main goals and aspirations to have that be a success and a consistent
to maintain the value of the token? So early on in Bitcoin Cash, I'll try to explain it for the audience because since this isn't a crypto podcast, but Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are what's called blockchains. You can think about them as like a page on an accounting ledger, and every 10 minutes or so, a new page is added. The person that finds that page gets to write an entry that makes Bitcoins out of nowhere and put them in their own account. In order to prevent there from just being tons and tons of pages, there's a calculation that has to be solved. It gets more difficult over time. So it turns out each block of Bitcoin, you get, initially there was 50 Bitcoins per block. They had some value associated with them. Now, it makes sense for a person, if those pages cost money to create, to spend up to the amount of value in electricity that the value the Bitcoins represent, right? But not more, because then they would be losing money. So anything less than how much those 50 Bitcoins would be worth is profit to them. They converted some electricity into this, digital currency that then they can exchange with other people and get some additional value beyond what they spend on electricity. And so people compete to find these new blocks, and they burn a lot of electricity to do that. In Bitcoin, the way the issuance was created, it just halves every 4 years. Other cryptocurrencies, they're flat, like Doge, it's just a certain amount of tokens per block. Same for F, although F has sort of manipulated that. But the key point is there's some free coins that anybody can make out of thin air, but they have to spend some effort to do that. And the amount of effort they're willing to do is up to that amount. So that's a threshold. So turns out as the price of those tokens change, more and more people or less people will mine that currency. And that's represented in terms of what's called the hash rate on a cryptocurrency. So the more that Bitcoins become worth, the more electricity people are willing to spend to compute these numbers, and the higher the higher the hash rate gets. So through some code that we wrote for Bitcoin Cash called the difficulty adjustment algorithm, it became apparent that people were very clearly doing this. They would mine Bitcoin Cash, or they would mine Bitcoin, and they sort of switch back and forth depending on which one was more profitable to mine, given what the current difficulty on the coin was and the relative price of those coins. So what Lotus does a little bit differently is it changes the number of coins issued to a function that is based on the hash rate, specifically the log of the hash rate. And so as the price goes up, people are willing to spend more electricity to get those coins, but we also issue more coins. So the supply increases as well. And so that has an effect of essentially using the root electricity that goes into making those coins as a pseudo peg for how many tokens should be issued, and increasing supply on the market to keep the price deflated, essentially, like keep it from going up extremely. And conversely, if the price is going down on the exchanges, people will mine less tokens are issued. There's also a few other aspects of Lotus where coins are burned in order to remove them from supply. So we're also building essentially a decentralized forum, bulletin board system. You want to post an ad for your business on there. The way that works is you have to burn tokens, right? And that affects your ranking on this essentially advertising board. And this is just one example of how you can do this. But by burning those tokens on the advertising board, those are removed from supply. And how many tokens you burn is going to depend on how much the attention of the people that read that board is to you, right? If it has a large audience, then that top space on that website is worth a lot. And you're going to, if the coin value isn't very high, you're going to need to burn a lot of those coins in order to get the top ad space. If the value of the tokens is high, you'll have to burn less tokens to get that top space, right? Because you're competing with other advertisers for space in marketing. And so the amount of tokens burned is essentially pricing the coin in terms of people's real world attention. So there's those two aspects: the real world cost of electricity and the real world value of people's attentions in terms of advertising. And those two things together interact with the various apps that people would use to essentially, use the Lotus blockchain to stabilize the price. In order to adjust the actual supply of Lotus that's available on the market to the price without needing any kind of oracle, right? It's all done through just decentralized, emergent processes that humans normally do.
Yes, that's a great explanation, and I think those are both really great ways of doing it. I think the scaling, because I remember when Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash were separated, and I remember it was becoming a little bit more difficult to do Bitcoin, to mine for Bitcoin. It wasn't as profitable, so then they would go to Bitcoin Cash, like you were just saying. So I definitely remember that, and that was, yeah, they're not even really supporting it then. They're just doing it for their own personal benefit, not because of the actual integrity of the cryptocurrency in particular that they're invested in. It's just
Correct.
because of, well, okay, this is not as profitable now, so I'm going to go over here. Well, what about the vision that this crypto has and its long-term vision and how it's planning on getting there? Is that something you truly believe in, or is it because it's just you just see crypto or dollar signs in your eyes and that's it? So I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to also use that incentive structure to keep people there, because you are adjusting it based on how much it costs for the electricity and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then also, like you're saying, with the marketing aspect, I think that's a great way I mean, that's a competition in sorts, because you're competing for the attention of people, and you're showing how much value you have in that. And I've seen on StampChat, I've been on there a few times, and I know someone that burned a lot. I think it was I believe 1,000 just
Mhm.
for their article, and people were just impressed that they burned that much. They were commenting,
Yeah.
and they were using Lotus to comment, so they
Yeah.
provided Lotus to even comment, which was also cool that you have that in the
Well, put
structure
your
as well.
put your put your money where your mouth is.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
essentially, in that way, Lotus is used as because Stamp also is decentralized, and there's no centralized moderator of it. So how do you moderate content on a platform that has no moderation? You have to attach some kind of costly uh, um, object or charge some kind of fee in order for a person to post. Otherwise, you just get spam bots. And this is what happened with email. Is that email is a decentralized open system, and it just became overwhelmed with spam, and so then everything sort of collapsed on these centralized platforms. Um, and so Lotus, that's sort of the other intent for me of Lotus, is to provide that spam mitigation aspect to other social media platforms. I'd really like to replace Twitter, Facebook, Google with decentralized alternatives, but in order to do that, you need some way to not have anybody be in control, and the only mechanism for that is a decentralized cryptocurrency. A lot of people these days, they have problems with what kind of speech is allowed on what platforms. It's totally up to the platforms. It's their right to do so. I agree with that. I don't like it though. I don't want to support platforms that do, filter out, whatever they decide is misinformation. And a lot of people are trying to go and create their own platforms. Well, we'll just leave Twitter and we'll go and do something else. But in almost all cases, they just end up having to censor whatever other misinformation is that they don't like. Right? And by attaching a cryptocurrency to it where people have to burn their money in order to post or vote or moderate, it's totally opposite of what most of these other cryptocurrency social platforms have done. They try to pay people when they post or get votes or whatever. But if they have to spend that money, then one, there's no spam. Two, you don't need moderation. And most nonsense will not be on there, right? Because people are not going to pay to put out information that isn't something that they, would benefit themselves somehow by it being out there.
Yeah, that's excellent. That is very exciting, and I agree with basically everything you said. And yeah, it was giving me such great ideas with how you're describing it, like burning, like put your money where your mouth is. You're burning the tokens in order to provide a comment. So it's almost like, and comparatively to Twitter and Facebook and all these other platforms where people are just can be so vulgar. Even on BitChute, people can be so vulgar for just out of nowhere. People just asking a question and they just call them an idiot or whatever. It's if people really think that they are going to act that same way in person, that's not most likely. People don't act that way in person. It's just because,
Yeah.
I'm completely anonymous. I'm going to post this, it's not going to cost me a dime. But now they have to, just like in real life, you don't want to just say something stupid and vulgar that adds nothing to the conversation. People are going to be like, okay, well, that was pointless.
Yeah, there's a real world cost to you.
Yeah, there's a real world cost to you. So in the same kind of sense, in the digital realm, you have this thing that you're invested in via Lotus, and then you have to burn a little bit to make a comment. So you want to provide a value. You want to make it to where that was worth it. Me
Yeah.
burning that. So but in what is the value in my mind too? So that, like you were saying, with people create the kind of value on their own. So I think it's all very, very interesting. And it's been really sad to see how long Bitcoin's been around, and then Bitcoin Cash, and then nothing kind of tangible was there for the most part. It was kind of just stifled for a lot of it. And I was really excited. I remember when Bitcoin Cash first came out, what was it, 2017, I think, August. I can't believe it was already almost 5 years ago. It's crazy. And it doesn't seem like anything really happened with it. And it's really
that was a huge
unfortunate.
case of malinvestment. I was kind of involved in the core culture, and there was a few philanthropic donors early on donated a bunch of money, and they just sort of spread it around, and they didn't want to, those individuals did not want to be in control of the project. They didn't want to tell people what to do. So they didn't really have a good way of deciding who got money and who didn't. And so there was just a lot of money spent on things that never really materialized because there was no accountability. It's just, it's a really sad situation. I was really, really involved in Bitcoin Cash. This is from the conference that was early on. And I think it's all incentives, though. Like the longer I've been in cryptocurrency, incentives are the foundation of security for Bitcoin, right? It pays miners to mine valid blocks. And so they have an incentive to do that. But as the longer I've been in cryptocurrency, the more I've watched people is the financial incentives are always what dictate the outcome. It's just a matter of sort of how long it takes.
Yeah, most definitely. And to kind of focus on StampChat in particular, what if people aren't familiar, for people that aren't familiar with it, what is StampChat? You're saying you kind of want to replace Twitter and Facebook and all these, which is great. I'm all about these.
Yeah.
I'm all about Minds.com and Float.app and BitChute and Odyssey. So I think it's great to have another one in the space, and it's also got its own token involved in it too. So like you were saying, people can post things. I've seen people post articles. Then like you're saying with advertisements, people could do that. Is there any sort of personal messaging, or what are some like kind of like the bullet point features that StampChat has?
Yeah, so originally Stamp is still, probably, only 30 or 40% done in terms of what it can do. So it works, there's it needs a base blockchain to work, and the base blockchain is used to cryptographically attach value to some piece of information in an abstract way. And then there's a layer 2 network called we call cache web, where if there is some value attached to this information on a transaction on the base blockchain, it'll get relayed there. And that prevents people from just sending tons of, it bootstraps itself off of cryptocurrency in order to prevent just tons of messaging spam. The actual architecture of the stamp messages is very similar to email, and it's kind of intended to serve a similar purpose to email, but in such a way as you don't have a huge incentive for everyone to kind of agglomerate under Gmail and Hotmail. And also, you don't need the messages to be unencrypted in order to get rid of spam, because if somebody's spamming you, they're paying you. It's really based on Hal Finney's concept of RPOW, reusable proof of work. And so I don't want to get into that too much, but the basic idea is if I want to send you a message and I include $10, and then you respond and you include the $10 back, we can keep doing that, and we haven't really lost anything. We have some money tied up in it, but if I want to spam and I have to send everybody $10 and I have a low chance of them responding back and giving me my money back, I'm going to be broke really quick. And that was the idea of RPOW, and that's prior to Hal Finney working on Bitcoin. Now, RPOW was a centralized solution, and it never really took off. Hal Finney died, and started working on Bitcoin. But what I realized is that Bitcoins themselves represent reusable proof of work. Somebody did some work, they got this token, right? So you can use the token as a proxy for proving that work was done. And then it has real world value. It can be exchanged, can be moved around. And so I figured out a way to cryptographically attach information to some amount of coins on chain uniquely. And so on Stamp, when I send you a message, I have to include some Lotus with it. It might be 1 Lotus, it might be 100 Lotus, it might be 1,000 Lotus. Your inbox is sorted by how much money the person has sent you. It's not just like, notification wise, but this person has sent me a lot of money. Let me read that one first. And so how much it costs to message you is essentially how much attention do you have to read your messages and how many messages you're getting. Like, I'm taking some monetary risk to bother to try to talk to you. So that's like the direct messaging and Stamp. I want to do group chats. Group chats are a little hard to do encrypted. Everything on Stamp direct messages are all encrypted by default. And then there's this aspect of these broadcast messages, which is what the forum is based on right now. And those require some amount of Lotus to be destroyed, and then they'll be broadcast to anyone that wants to pull them off the network. Essentially, just an ordered list of recent messages with some amount of burned Lotus attached to them. And from those two, the direct messaging system and the broadcast messaging system, you can build all sorts of DApps. The most obvious one to do is a message like a human to human messenger. You can build bots and like dexes and all kinds of other stuff on top of this in a permissionless way.
So those two things you just listed off that people can, what were those? Docs and
Dex.
Or Dex and what was the other one?
Decentralized exchange.
Okay.
And various bots, right? You can have bots that essentially send and receive Lotus based on structured messages. So you can have programs that sit there and provide services for Lotus, or talk to each other, talk to human beings. It's pretty easy to write stores on top. I'd love to have that.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for explaining that, because I was a little lost right there at the end. So thank you for that. Math 1989. I gotta. It's not. This has nothing to do with anything, but this was just too funny. Math 1989 says Shammah seems to be having some internet connection issues, and then Tobias says, "No, I met him in real life. He talks like that."
Yeah.
That was great. Thank you, Tobias. That was awesome. Sorry, I just looked at that. It was distracting me earlier. It was just too funny.
I'm a little choppy.
It might be the StreamYard also. I'm going to be switching to OBS or look into that and also try to do a couple interviews on that, see how that goes. So it might be also the StreamYard as well. So sorry, guys, for anything like that, any issues that we're having. So that's great. Thank you for explaining more about StampChat and some of the features it has. So besides StampChat, is there anything else that's in the near term future for you, and anything else that's in the pipeline?
So for me, Stamp is like, I had started it before Lotus. There's a ton that can be done with it to build out all the kinds of functionality that like Facebook and Twitter have. That's going to take a long time. And then I'm hoping to just provide an open platform where people can build dApps on top of Stamp. So, essentially do everything that WeChat does, but in a trustless, permissionless, uncensorable way. But Tobias works with me on this, and he has some other things he wants to do. He wants some on-chain chess system. I haven't taken the time to fully understand that, but I think essentially a decentralized way of betting on chess and having the whole game recorded through transactions on chain. But yeah, we would like to provide a DEX as well, where we can wrap other tokens on Lotus. Part of the changes we made for the protocol was to allow us to do that. And then, aside from Lotus and Stamp, there's a lot of other, like, we essentially rebooted an entire economy and started from scratch. So there's all kinds of other stuff that needs to happen. I'm hoping to provide the infrastructure for a lot of other people to do that, but it would be great to have bank-like features in a wallet. Yeah, everything's needed. We need storefronts. We're building. There's this kind of concept that's gone around very recently. I hadn't really heard of it before, called parallel institutions, and that's kind of the philosophy of Lotus, right? But in order to build parallel institutions, you got to start with the monetary system. Like, how do you who issues the money, and how do you get it, and what is the monetary policy going to be? So we started there, and now we need to build the full stack up. The other primary things people need is communications, and so that's Stamp, and then after that, there's a lot of other stuff that, like, I don't know, I'd love to have a Lotus news channel, where it's part of, where we're not sort of kowtowing to the existing economic incentives that people have, and just putting out news that is worthwhile. But what does any society need? All those things I would love to see in the near term, but it depends on growing the use of Stamp and Lotus to the point where there is enough funding and use to actually execute on these other projects.
Yeah, and that goes right in line with Bitcoin Cash and the problem that they were having. Like you were saying earlier, the developers or the miners wanted to be able to get a certain amount of reward for all the work that they were putting into, and they needed kind of that underlying funding foundation in order to really continue on. So yeah, that's great. That's the main thing we got to focus on, is just having that continue on, and the incentive structure that you laid out and you have in the white paper is great. I think it's a great step. And I personally, and like you were saying with parallel societies or institutions, that's the concept that I've been looking into. A lot of people that I listen to and follow, they say that it's not just about battling that system that they have, or this whole entire system. It's about just coming together with community and building your own systems and creating resilience in that way, and having accountability, personal responsibility, and trying not to do any harm to anybody, and just acting in a voluntary way, which is the opposite of what these structures are basically doing. And
correct. And a lot of those parallel institutions, though, they lack a currency to support them. By starting with money, there's a unique non-violent power tool that we now have. There's this concept of the tyranny of the minority. It's not really a tyranny per se, but you think about within religions, there's these like acceptable food laws, like kosher or halal. If you go to the grocery store, almost all food in there is kosher or halal, because people that are not of those religious backgrounds will eat kosher and halal food, but those people will not. So if you're a business and you want to maximize your profit and your audience to buying your products, you're going to make sure that your food is kosher and halal, because that maximizes the potential audience. And then you have veganism and vegetarianism, and veganism has become super popular. It's an individual person making a personal ethical choice. I'm not a vegan, but I support their right not to eat meat if they don't want to. But you definitely see it's had an impact on what's actually available on store shelves. Tons more vegetarian and vegan products because the ideology is spread. And I am trying to get this idea of essentially crypto veganism. I call it, ethical money. Is pick, what are the people? Because tokens are, I say tokens generally, but like any type of currency is issued by an organization of some sort or a piece of software or whatever, and then they spend those units of value to do some things, and then those trickle down through the economy, and we exchange our work for them. So with the U.S. dollar, the currency is created by taking a loan out from the Federal Reserve, and then the government spends it on a contract for Lockheed Martin. One of their employees goes to Safeway, buys some groceries. That employee comes in and, I don't know, maybe buys something at my garage sale. So indirectly, I have supported bombing children somewhere else in the world. But if I didn't use US dollars, and I said use Chinese yuan or something like that instead for my transactions, I would just be supporting what the Chinese government is doing, right? So I don't want to use any of these things. I would prefer to use cryptocurrencies because as far as I know, no cryptocurrency products are bombing any children. Right? They're not harming anybody. It's all voluntary associations. And so that's where the value of cryptocurrency comes in, is based on what are people's ideologies. And then what are the incentive structures around cryptocurrencies? Unfortunately, no cryptocurrencies maintain stable values for me to be able to use them in business and say, hey, I will accept a salary for, 1,000 Bitcoins a year. No one would take that contract, right? Even if 1,000 Bitcoins was a reasonable price for, what I do. Because they wouldn't be sure what they would end up paying me later. Right? So if people start practicing the use of ethical money, now they don't have to do it with all their money. It's impossible to sort of get out of the system right now, right? We have to rebuild all of the institutions before we can live where we don't need to use US dollars or any of these other currencies that are essentially issued by militaries. Right? It's going to take a long time for us to be able to make personal choices to never use currencies that are issued and maintained by militaries. But if people just do it with some of their transactions and some of their money, some of the time, slowly the parallel institutions grow, right? And the military funding starts getting reduced. And I think that's absolutely critical idea for people to understand and start practicing. And Lotus, I want Lotus to be one of those things that actually like you can denominate things in.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing underlying crypto that's been, which has been unfortunate in my view, is we're valuing it in US dollars. Instead of saying, hey, I have 50 Lotus, and people are like, oh, okay, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Not where this is worth this many dollars, but yeah, like you're saying. So yeah, and just the whole supporting of things that we don't really fundamentally principally agree with, like the bombing and all these things. That's why I try to avoid working in jobs that are taxed. I try to do maybe landscaping or certain things where I'm just helping out people, and they donate to me. They give me a donation. They're not actually paying me for work.
But it doesn't even matter if it's taxed or not, though.
Yeah.
This is a very common misconception with people in these spaces, is that the government funds this stuff based on signage, right? They print the money, they spend it, then they tax it. The taxes are there to stop inflation. As if you even use it for anything, if it's donated to you and then you spend it and use it, you're giving it value. And so really the only way to escape is to build something different that actually works.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing for me. I'm just trying to do as little harm as possible. So me giving them more taxes or whatever else, and it's just it's worsening my position because they're taking whatever percent they're taking from me. So I don't want to work as a slave. So at least I'm working for at least a lot more value than I was getting before. But yeah,
Yeah.
underlying that
What?
is the dollar that I'm accepting still, and I'm using it, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. Yeah, the whole system is just ridiculous, and the dollar sucks. And like you were talking about earlier, about the value of it going down 90, what, 97, 98, 99%,
Yeah.
whatever it is now.
Yeah. So, and the taxes are actually kind of a nice feature of their systems because it almost pushes people out. Right? You have an incentive not to do work that is taxed. And I think that'll ultimately be kind of the downfall of all of this. Is that there, as more and more alternatives come out where, like, I think it was eBay is now reporting people to the IRS if they do more than $600 worth of transactions a year. You're going to not want to use eBay. You're going to want to use a decentralized auctioning system, and and we can build that. And it's just going to take time, and patience, and hard work.
Yeah, and something earlier you said, I wanted to touch on that because it was a really great point. You were talking about people's ideologies, and that's what's the main driving factor. Absolutely. It's all starting with our brains. What kind of information do we have? What foundation do we have based on information, and how much truth is within that foundation? And then
Yeah.
how we come to an understanding of the information we've accrued, and then from there taking action in the real world, applying that information that we have, whether it's good or bad, or right or wrong, or truthful or not truthful. So that's the basis of everything. That's how our reality is created. It's based on our information. And so with Lotus and StampChat, Tobias has a question. Can you ask Shammah about Lotuston? So I wanted to go a little bit into something else, but yeah, I would love for this question. Thank you, Tobias, for the question. I appreciate it.
I'm not sure into what sense he's talking about Lotuston, but the basic idea is, like, what is this sort of ideal place that we would like to live? What is this imaginary country that we're building? What are all the components we need in order to, live there, right? And one's money. We need a messenger. We need farms. We have to have all this stuff set up. It could be, though, because I was originally referring to this as Lotusia, and a rival refraction came up with Lotustan instead. So I'm not exactly sure how the Maya mythology all fits in, whether they're at war with Lotusia or whatnot. But mostly it's just a bunch of nonsense. It's a thought experiment, is what it is. Is like, how do you make a whole parallel society from the ground up? Well, you need a country. Okay, what do you call it? Okay, we can have digital passports or whatever. How do you become a citizen of this? What does a citizen do? What are the responsibilities of a citizen? How do you make like, you're gonna have to have a government of some sort. Everything ends up having a government. So what should that government look like, and how do you stop it from being corrupted? Like, these are all kind of the questions that we're going through in Lotus at the moment, as part of the designs. One of the the interesting things was on Bitcoin Cash, and I said this before, is that the development's always centralized of a coin. Right? It's not the network topology is decentralized, and whether you choose to run the binaries produced or not, which piece of software you use is totally voluntary. But the actual development work, there has to be a group of people that come together, write some code, put it in the same repository, compile it, and distribute it. That's true for all cryptocurrencies. There's no such thing as decentralized development. And so there always has to be governance systems for that kind of stuff. They don't have to be states, and they don't need armies, right? With the Bitcoin Cash eCash fork, you had a development team called Bitcoin ABC. They decided they wanted to impose 8% signage that would come to them. Another development team popped up and was like, "Oh, that's actually a tax. It technically doesn't meet the definition of tax. It is voluntary," and it sort of, they proved that it was voluntary by the fact that they were able to fork Bitcoin ABC off the Bitcoin Cash network. So now Bitcoin ABC is running on the eCash network. But it's the first time in history where you essentially had two digital governments and where there was a completely nonviolent, mostly peaceful transition, right? There's some insults slung around. No guns were picked up. Nobody was injured. Mostly people fighting on Twitter about ideology, and ultimately the ideology of the quote unquote ruling party of Bitcoin Cash lost out, and now they're on a smaller chain.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for that. I saw in the comments section that there was a question by Mark. Is there a way that Lotus can sponsor Nicholas Peter and his future content? Benefits for both parties. That's
Absolutely. I would love to find somebody that can do consistent content creation and mention Lotus. In fact, it's not really possible without building more software ourselves, but I would like to do some kind of subscription service to a newsletter where it's paid in US dollars or something along those lines. You get the content, and with the content, you get a commensurate amount of Lotus, right? So it allows you to sort of bypass cryptocurrency exchanges. You receive some information, you receive your Lotus, you give up some USD. That USD is then used to support the real world expenses of bootstrapping the rest of the project. A lot of people will say, like, I'm going to try to make some Lotus t-shirts and sell them. A lot of cryptocurrencies will make the t-shirts and sell them in the cryptocurrency. But in order to bootstrap the cryptocurrency, what you really want to do is sell the t-shirts for US dollars and give the people buying the t-shirts some of the cryptocurrency with them. That's the right incentive. So if we could, give all the audience Lotus, I would love that. That's what we want to do. We need to get it into people's hands.
yes.
I as a reasonable person, I can't expect people to come and buy Lotus. I'm not telling anybody to buy Lotus. Buy into the idea of Lotus and do something for the community, and people tip Lotus a lot. There's part of the block reward goes to making sure that new users can be onboarded. Right? Those tokens go to a specific output, and then they're just handed out to the community constantly. Anybody that's doing positive work in the community. It's interesting because it also incentivizes good behavior. So it's a way to shape what a positive community should look like, which a lot of other projects don't end up having. You get they're cussing and being jerks to everybody in the forums, then nobody tips them.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because just that's the thing I was thinking about when I was reading the white paper is it's just the ease of use, the user interface, or just whatever it is. Like with email, people just go online, just punch in whatever they created an email, and then just start sending messages to each other, and they don't really. There's not many barriers to entry on that. So
Correct.
that for me, in order to see like a widespread adoption with people that are layman's and they don't really know what this all is, the most ease of use is probably the most beneficial thing, I'd say, because a lot of people think, oh, well, I don't have a lot of time to delve into researching all this stuff and how it works and how to keep myself protected and all these other things.
Yeah.
But just being able to get to the Lotus and actually have it on you in a pretty easy fashion, that's probably the best way to get adoption as well, or a partial benefit.
I mean, a lot of cryptocurrencies initially, like the cryptocurrencies are airdropped or whatever, but they're trying to get you to buy it, right? Ultimately, they're trying to sell you a product. Whereas I want people to use our software, and the tokens fuel the use of the software. So it has value. If you like our software and you want to use it, it has value to you. So there's a reason for advertisers to come in later and buy the token so that they can use the messaging boards, right? And spam us with their AdWords posts or whatever. But for now, it's more of an issue of getting like-minded individuals together, and the tokens are essentially free. You can buy them if you want to support the project, but if you come into the chat, I think there's people giving it out right now. And we're trying to collect people together and unify them under one type of currency that doesn't bomb kids and actually wants to, wants to do positive things in the world. Like, I'm not just interested in cryptocurrency. My undergraduate degree, I study atmospheric physics. I worked in a lab funded by the EPA, and I do think that that the environment needs to be protected, and that we need to, reforest certain areas and de-desertify and all this sort of stuff. So, if we can do that kind of stuff with Lotus as well, that would be, absolutely fantastic. It's not all just about, digital communications and money.
Yes, yeah. And when you were talking about digital communications and money and the last part, for me, if I were to use Lotus or the StampChat, can I use it similarly to Facebook and Minds and Float, where I can have maybe a couple hashtags or any sort of thing like that and attach a video, like where I link to maybe my BitChute video or my YouTube video, and it has like a thumbnail that pops up or anything like that?
So it's very minimal software right now. There's
Okay.
a lot that needs to get done with it. It supports Markdown. So you can link to external content and you can reference things via Markdown. But that's about it. It's
Okay.
DMs right now in this public forum. And if you can put some HTML in there, there's a very limited subset of things that'll work. But the UX there needs to improve. But right now we're focusing on getting the infrastructure out and getting some basic use. And from there, we'll, add all the embedded stuff you're talking about, because that's definitely important. Content sharing is, yeah, but the project has to grow and spread and get mind share among other software engineers that want to participate. And everybody that participates gets paid in Lotus if they do stuff. So if you think it'll, if you think it's the right thing, then yeah, come and participate in this sort of parallel economy with your labor.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's great. So, Mark also had a good idea. We need a slogan or a marketing campaign that's catchy and pulls in more people. I love the hashtag Give Lotus motto.
Yeah, I'm sort of a throw spaghetti at the wall kind of meme person. I don't think you can design memes, and I don't have strong opinions on most of this stuff. I think whatever spreads is the best, and I expect that people will try things, and eventually something will be viral. So whatever you want to come up with, Mark, go for it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because it is kind of open-ended. It may not be. It's not one size fits all for something. One thing may help propel something into more of the spotlight, and then something else for something else. So yeah, it's great. Yeah. Enzo has a good kind of like viewpoint of it. I think in some sense, I think BitMoney is just a big experiment, and the guinea pigs are the folks buying it right now. One day it's like, okay, party is over, and there goes your savings. Good luck getting your money back. And I would say maybe in terms of how the power structure right now, that kind of is not like what is it? What's the main place that people go to? Coinbase. And then just how you have to tie a lot of your information to that, and it's so centralized in that sense. And then I can totally see the government saying, okay, well, now people are using crypto in the way that we don't want them to use it, where they're actually creating systems. So now we're going to kind of swoop in or maybe do a lot more enforcing in that area. And I think that's very possible. Do I want that to happen? No. Am I thinking it's going to happen right away? No. Or I don't want it to happen whatsoever. So it's not something I want, but it is a possibility, and that's something I've been kind of a little weary about, but just trying to be realistic about it.
Yeah, I empathize with Enzo's position here. I have never told anyone to buy any cryptocurrency, and I would never say such a thing. I think a lot of cryptocurrencies are set up as essentially MLMs or Ponzi schemes or whatever, and because the whole point is that the token goes up in value a lot due to the way that it's issued and finite supply, whatever. So newcomers get a lot more than people that come later. With Lotus, we don't want to have that. We want the token to maintain a stable value over time. And I still don't encourage anybody to buy. If you want to support the project, fine, but consider that a donation if you buy some Lotus. But otherwise, come use our software and experiment with it and participate in the community and just give it to you.
Yeah, and and I already have an account on there. I did a little bit of messaging, but I'm seeing that the UI is going to be getting a little bit of more of an improvement, like the chat bubbles and stuff. So
yeah,
I think that's us looking at Signal or Telegram or some of these other messaging apps and just seeing like the layout, what are the features they have, how easy is it to go from one thing to another in your settings and whatnot, having a dark mode or whatever else, like those kind of things that people are kind of expecting. Just keep trying to increase that. It's just gonna be all the more easier to bring people in.
Adoption from other software engineers is critical, and so if we can get that market and they're willing to tolerate it, then once software engineers are using it, it's open source, they get paid in the token to work on it, all that stuff all sort of self out. But it's hard to bootstrap a community in a token from scratch without taking a bunch of VC funding, because if you take VC funding, they're going to want a return on their investment. So you have to, figure out some way to do quick, some kind of quick turnaround on the token. Just starting from scratch as a community project without some big corporate, investor backing. It takes a long time.
And it's really unfortunate, because if I had, like, for me, if I had some of that, a lot of financial, if I had a lot of finances in my bank account or whatever else, I would have the mindset of, you know what, I'm going to throw in 10 grand to this because I believe in the principle of it. I believe in the foundation of it. I don't care if I get anything back or not. I believe in what's going on. And I know that in time, this is going to prove to be way better than what we're doing right now. And the value of that is so much more important to me than just some numbers on a screen or numbers in my account. So and it's all about, like you were saying, the ideology. People's mindsets at this moment are kind of in that, obviously, like I was saying beforehand, like all about the dollars and all that stuff. So it's all about changing our perception. We know that these kinds of things can provide way better solutions and way more freedom. We don't get freedom by supporting slavery and supporting war and supporting all these things. We get freedom by supporting things that actually support freedom. And then
that's almost the superpower about having one of these tokens, though, is the basis of creating all these parallel institutions, is that if a person with a lot of money goes on and buys the token, they've essentially made a donation to all the people working on top of Lotus, right? All the different organizations and the developers and shop owners and whoever else is accepting and exchanging that currency. But they get Lotus back, and they can use Lotus in that economy or sell it later if they need their money back. So it's sort of an interesting thing where you're making a donation, but you could get a return later or not, right? Like you get essentially a receipt that you have made a donation to a whole bunch of parallel institutions is one way to think about it.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, I definitely agree. All right, so we're a little bit over the hour mark, and I know we talked before about the potential of doing another one. I'd love to be able to have you on again in the near-term future, and I'm going to be looking into OBS and any other streaming software out there, so I can, because I've had another person, Ricky Verandis of the Ripple Effect, on my podcast or my channel, and he had some similar kind of issues, but I've seen him do other interviews, and his webcam's crystal clear. So I think it might be a software issue, most definitely on my end. And I think Tobias looked into it and said your connection's perfect. So it definitely is the software. So I'm definitely going to be upgrading my software, so I don't have any issues regardless of who I have on. So that'll be much better. But if you just want to give a brief description of where people can find you, and then just give a couple bullet points on what people can expect in the future from Lotus and StampChat. And I'd really appreciate it. Thank you again once again for coming on.
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me in the Give Lotus Telegram channel right now. Hopefully in the future we'll have that all moved over into Stamp. I think Telegram's kind of most likely a honeypot of some sort. So I'd just love to have that. Why wouldn't we be using our own platform? So that's one of the things you can expect I don't know how much in the near future it will be, but it's one of the top on the priority list. And what was the third thing you asked me?
Just what people can expect from Lotus and StampChat in the future.
Yeah, so group chats, we want to get notifications on wallets. Basically, anything that can drive community engagement and keep people in contact with one another. So Stamp right now, it works. It's functional. You can talk to people on it. UX is a little bit not that great, but that's all. That's easily fixable. It just requires iteration. But there's no notifications, so that's something that we've got to solve. It's a little bit of a hard problem to solve because you have to go through these centralized push notification servers, and that's not the way that Stamp works. So there are ways to solve that. Not the best, but that'll allow, when you onboard somebody to Lotus and you onboard them on a Stamp, they'll actually come back and check their messages later. Because right now it's sort of a void. You got somebody, it's pretty easy to onboard somebody and get them some Lotus, give them $5 worth of Lotus or 5,000 Lotus as it is right now. Hopefully it'll be worth more in the future. But then there's no further contact with these people. So that's the thing we're focusing on right now, is driving community engagement and being able to reach out to the people that we've onboarded again in the future, right, through like the wallet apps and whatnot.
Excellent. I'm very excited to see what's to come from StampChat and Lotus. It's very much something I'm interested in, and just reading the white paper, like I said earlier, it's just the concept of it, the nonviolence, the voluntary aspect of it. That's totally what I'm about. It's definitely what we need to do, not violating anyone's rights. And yeah, it's just the most important thing in my eyes. So this is definitely something I'm excited about, and I'm looking forward to using it more often. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone that's been watching. Thank you so much for staying on here this entire time. It really means a lot to me, and just the engagement in the comment section has been excellent. So, and all the constructive dialogue. So thank you guys for that. It really means a lot to me, and I would just love to have you on again. It would be fantastic. And I just appreciate the time that you took and the interest that you had in coming on. It really means a lot. I think this is a great discussion, and also just delving more into the philosophy of and going into the white paper and all that stuff. I think that'll be excellent. There's so much more to delve into. And so, yeah, just thank you once again for coming on, and thank you everyone else for watching.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me, and thanks everybody for taking the time to listen to my nonsense. I appreciate it.
Yes, most definitely. All right. Take care, everybody.